Economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Foreign Affairs Minister Mr. Ahmed Hattaf has hailed the success of the 11th ministerial meeting of the Committee of the 10 Heads of State and Government of the African Union, C10, on the reform of the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution aimed at reaching comprehensive ceasefire deal in the 3 phases to end the war in Gaza. The Algerian permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Amr Benjama, has said that Algeria voted in favor of the draft resolution as it presents a step towards an immediate and lasting ceasefire. The Palestinian death toll from the Zionist onslaught since October 7th has risen to 37,164 reported fatalities, with an additional 84,832 individuals sustaining injuries. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Hattaf, has hailed the success of the 11th ministerial meeting of the Committee of 10 Heads of State and Government of the African Union, C10, on the reform of the UN Security Council, highlighting the valuable contribution and remarkable presence at the proceedings of the meeting. At the press conference held at the Algiers International Conference Centre with his Sierra Leonean counterpart, Mr. Moussa Timothy Kaba, who chaired the meeting, Mr. Hattaf said that the meeting was part of the ongoing African efforts to correct the historical injustice and marginalization endured by the African continent within the Security Council by working to promote and enshrine the African common position as stipulated in the Isuwilni Consensus and the Sirte Declaration. Algeria's foreign minister added that the proceedings focus on 2 main angles, namely assessment and planning. In terms of planning, the head of the Algerian diplomacy went on to say that the discussions culminated in the adoption of an ambitious action plan aimed at pushing for the Security Council's reform and building on the growing support for the African common position. Mr. Hattaf said the plan defines 5 main points for Africa's future efforts and approaches, starting with strengthening the internal front, preserving the unity of the African ranks in the face of attempts to bribe some members of our group to take a rather path to do not conform to the common vision and unifying consensus within the framework of the African Union.
أولاً تأكيد التزامنا الجماعي بالموقف الإفريقي المشترك.
First, to affirm our collective commitment to the common African position on the Security Council reform. Second, to highlight the growing international awareness of the legitimacy and legality of our demands for a greater African empowerment within the Security Council. Third, to highlight the specificity of African demands, which require particular attention because of the marginalization endured by the African continent at the Security Council. Fourth, to insist on the need to respect our collective efforts, the improvement of the African position in the face of attempts to divide the African front. Finally, to adopt an ambitious plan of action to give concrete expression to our future initiatives and efforts to preserve African unity.
For his part, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Sierra Leone, Mr. Moussa Timothy Kaba, conveyed the greetings and thanks of the President of Sierra Leone to the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, for hosting the meeting and supporting the common African position on the reform of the Security Council. And now the Minister of Health, Mr. Abdelhak Saihi, representing the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is participating in a high-level conference entitled Emergency Humanitarian Response in Gaza, whose summit is taking place today in Amman, Jordan. The summit will discuss ways to provide humanitarian assistance to Gaza in line with the needs and find practical steps to ensure the immediate, adequate and sustainable delivery of emergency humanitarian assistance. The Jace magazine has said that the National People's Army is competent, engaged and devoted to constitutional missions, stressing the main concern of its command is empowering its operation and combat capacity in the face of all threats. The magazine recalled the innovation and modernization of infrastructure and the necessary tools based on human resources that master science and modern technology. The review recalled the statement of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Supreme Chief of the Armed Forces, Minister of the National Defense, who affirmed when he visited the headquarters of the Ministry of Defense that the preservation of national sovereignty goes in line with a strong army and developed economy. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, General Said Changriha, has presided over the opening of a conference held under the theme The Digital Content Industry, the Guarantor of a National Memory. The conference organised here in Algiers was aimed at highlighting the threats posed to the national memory and the means of dealing with them on the various digital platforms. In his opening speech, General Changriha said the following.
لقد تغير مفهوم الأمن مع تغير طبيعة الحروب.
The concept of security has evolved with the changing nature of warfare. As we now speak of identity security, social security, and cyber security, in light of the new wars being waged in the world today, or what are known as hybrid wars, the media, in particular social media, has become essential tools and resources in destabilization strategies that aim at undermining the cultural and civilization identities of nations and the process of building their future, working to erase national identity, distort history, misinform and cast doubt on national symbols.
المضللة والتشكيك في الرموز الوطنية.
That was the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, General Said Changriha. The head of the General Confederation of Algerian Companies, Saïda Nerza, has announced in Algiers that she would be participating in the coming presidential election on September 7th. At a press conference, Mrs. Nerza announced her participation in the elections as an independent candidate, adding that she had taken this decision after careful consideration and being fully aware of the aspirations of the Algerian people. The Minister of Religious Affairs, Mr. Youssef Belmehdi, said the Saudi minister met the Saudi Minister of Hajj and Umrah, Mr. Tawfiq Al-Rabia, in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. During the meeting, which took place on the sidelines of the 48th session of the Grand Islamic Conference for the Hajj season, the two ministers discussed the organization of the Hajj this year, as well as the coordination described as exemplary between the Saudi authorities in charge of the operation and the Algerian Hajj mission. The Saudi side hailed the efforts made by the Algerian Hajj Affairs Office since the beginning of the preparation for the pilgrimage and the close coordination between the two parties with a view to ensuring the success of the Hajj season in general and enabling Algerian Hajjis to perform the rites and piety in serenity. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution aimed at reaching a comprehensive ceasefire deal in 3 phases to end the war in Gaza. Asia Bekar has more in this report.
Adopted by a large majority with 14 votes in favor and Russia abstaining, Resolution 2735 also urges both parties to the conflict to fully implement the terms of the proposal without delay and without condition. According to the resolution, Phase 1 includes an immediate, full and complete ceasefire with the release of hostages including women, the elderly and the wounded, the return of the remains of some hostages who have been killed and the exchange of Palestinian prisoners. It calls for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas of Gaza, the return of Palestinians to their homes and neighborhoods throughout the enclave, including in the north, as well as the safe and effective distribution of humanitarian assistance at scale. Phase 2 would see a permanent end to hostilities in exchange for the release of all other hostages still in Gaza and the full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. In Phase 3, a major multi-year reconstruction plan for Gaza would begin, and the remains of any deceased hostages still in Gaza would be returned to the Israeli occupation. The Council also underlined the proposal's provision that if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks for Phase 1, the ceasefire will continue as long as negotiations continue. The resolution says that the Israeli occupation has accepted the deal and calls on the Palestinians to do the same. It also notes that the Security Council rejects any attempt at demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip including any actions that would use the territory of the enclave. The text also reiterates the Council's unwavering commitment to the vision of the two-state solution, where two democratic states live side by side in peace within secure and recognized borders consistent with international law and relevant UN resolutions. In this regard, it stresses the importance of unifying the Gaza Strip with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority.
The Algerian permanent representative to the United Nations, Ahmed Benjama, has said that Algeria voted in favor of the draft resolution as it represents a step towards an immediate and lasting ceasefire. More details in this report by Yassia Bekkar.
The Algerian permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Benjama, added that this text is not perfect, but it offers a glimmer of hope to the Palestinians as the alternative is continued killing and suffering.
We voted in favor of the draft resolution submitted by the United States because we believe it can represent a step toward an immediate and lasting ceasefire. And I would like to extend our gratitude to the U.S. delegation, especially Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, for their diligent efforts and for addressing some of our concerns in the final text.
Mr. Benjama declared that the time had come to put an end to the massacres in the Gaza Strip. He then reiterated Algeria's unwavering support for the Palestinians' right to freedom.
We Algerians deeply feel the suffering of Palestinians, and with our own history of struggle against colonial occupation, we fully understand and support their legitimate and just demands. As a free and dignified people, the Palestinians will never accept living under occupation. They will never abdicate their fight for liberation.
He added that the Palestinian cause was a major priority for Algeria as part of her mandate at the UN Security Council.
From the start of our mandate in the Council, our objective has been and remains clear and unwavering: to halt the massacres committed by the Israeli occupying forces in Gaza. During these dark times in human history, Algeria's sole guiding principle has been the preservation of Palestinian lives. We cannot stand by while the Israeli occupying forces continue to exterminate Palestinians. We also cannot remain silent in the face of this collective punishment.
Regarding the latest massacre perpetrated on Saturday in the Nusayrat camp in the center of Gaza and in all occupied territories, Ammar Benjama said those responsible for the death of Palestinians will be held accountable. He also called for addressing the root causes of the Palestinian tragedy, calling for implementing the rulings of the International Court of Justice.
Speaking to reporters after the adoption of the resolution by the UN Security Council, the permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, Mr. Riyad Mansour, hailed the efforts of Algeria in reaching the objective.
Of course, our position has been always to have an immediate ceasefire to stop the killing of our people. So this resolution is a step in that direction. We are grateful for our brothers in Algeria, whom we worked with them very closely to try to influence the draft resolution to be closer to the objectives of the national rights of the Palestinian people. We succeeded to a certain extent, but of course we did not succeed in all the things that we wanted. But nevertheless, we welcome this step, and I believe that all the Palestinians welcome this step. We want to have a ceasefire. We want to see the implementation of the objective of stopping the fighting completely.
For its part, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, considered that the adoption of this resolution constitutes an important step towards the international community assuming its responsibilities towards stopping the crime of genocide that the occupation has been committed for 8 months against our Palestinian brothers in the Gaza Strip. The OIC further called for concerted efforts and for everyone to assume their responsibilities in order to ensure the beginning of the implementation of the resolution. Meanwhile, several countries and organizations welcomed the adoption of a ceasefire resolution. Reacting to the adoption of the US proposed resolution, the representative of the Palestinian resistance movement in Algiers, Youssef Hamdan, held the points included in the resolution. Radio Algeria International contacted him, and he had this to say.
We welcome the contents of the Security Council resolution, in particular the implementation of a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the full withdrawal of the occupying forces, the exchange of prisoners, the reconstruction of the enclave, the return of refugees to their homes, the rejection of any demographic change, and the reduction of the area of the Gaza Strip, as well as the approval of the introduction of the necessary aid for our people in Gaza.
That was the representative of the Palestinian resistance movement in Algiers, Youssef Hamdan. The Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th has risen to 37,164 reported fatalities, with an additional 84,832 individuals sustaining injury, the majority of whom are women and children. The Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, resulting in the documented killing of 40 Palestinians and the injury of 120 others. Meanwhile, in Ramallah, 4 Palestinians were killed and 8 others were injured during incursions by the Israeli occupation forces near the village of Kafr Neema, west of Ramallah. And now the UN Security General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has expressed his extreme sadness and condemnation of the barbaric attack carried out by the Israeli occupation army on Saturday in the Nusayrat camp in the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding hundreds of Palestinians. Evoking the humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, Mr. Stefan Dujarric said that the Israeli military operation in the Nusayrat refugee camp has further deteriorated the conditions of hospital in Khan Yunis.
From Gaza itself, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs report that the Israeli military operation in the Nusayrat refugee camp overwhelmed the already limited capacity of hospitals, especially Al-Aqsa and Al-Wada hospitals in Deir al-Balah and the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis. A UN interagency mission to Al-Aqsa Hospital on Saturday found that the facility was hosting about 700 patients, which is nearly 5 times the capacity for inpatient services. Just 1 generator of the hospital is still running. Fuel is also critically short in Gaza. Colleagues working on water, sanitation, hygiene report that just 20% of the fuel needed for vital water and wastewater facilities was received during the week of 26 May.
Reiterating the UN's call to protect civilians, Mr. Dujarric said that every loss of life is tragic. That's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to this program by my colleague Saïd Bourazi. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. First in the news, the South 2 Corridor project for transporting green hydrogen produced in Algeria to Italy and the European countries embodies the approach of a partnership based on common interests, said in Palermo, Italy, the president of the Maghreb office at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Filippo Colombo, during a conference on energy and tourism in sustainable development in the Mediterranean basin. The conference was organized by the Alliance of Mediterranean News Agencies, AMAN, as part of its 32nd General Assembly. The ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Algiers, Yoo Kim-jun, has said in Algiers that the first Africa-Korea summit held on 4th and 5th June in Seoul should further strengthen bilateral cooperation with Algeria, pointing out that Algeria is the only African country to have a bilateral strategic partnership with the Republic of Korea. Mr. Yu Ki-jun was speaking to APS on the occasion of the first Africa-Korea Summit attended by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, as part of his working visit to the Republic of Korea on the instruction of the President of the Republic. The Minister of Housing, Town Planning and Urban Development, Mohamed Tarek Billaribi, has inspected various public infrastructures under construction at the Hawsh al-Rih Urban Center in Blida, according to a ministry press release. During this field visit, the minister checked on the progress of work on the primary school, which has reached 95% completion, and the polyclinic 80% before visiting the post office, which was completed in a record time of 65 days, and the police station soon to be completed. Mr. Billaribi also inspected the progress of work on an intermediate school, which is 65% complete, and instructed that the pace be accelerated so that the work can be completed before the summer. In more Algerian economic news, Sonatrach has taken part with a high-level delegation led by its Secretary General Abdelkader Zarruqi in the Baku Energy Week, organized from 4 to 6 June in the capital of Azerbaijan, according to a group press release. The event is an opportunity for the Algerian delegation to meet with representatives of energy majors to discuss partnership and cooperation opportunities. The Baku Energy Week is one of the most important annual events in the energy industry, where CEOs of energy companies, heads of governments, agencies, experts and developers of technological solutions meet to discuss topics related to the sector. The governor of the Bank of Algeria, Salahuddin Taleb, has received the executive director of the executive board of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Bahadur Bijani, who underlined Algeria's solid economic performance, strengthening its position within this institution, according to a press release issued by the Bank of Algeria. During their meeting, Bahadur Bijani noted Algeria's comfortable economic situation and the solidity of the indicators posted, particularly in terms of economic recovery, the balance of payments and the external position, as expressed by the IMF's Article 4 mission, according to the press release. And to wrap it up, the project to build a new terminal to the east of Algiers' Houari Boumediene International Airport is in the process of being launched in order to cope with the flow of passengers in the coming years, said Mukhtar Said Medyouni, CEO of the Algiers Airport Services and Infrastructure Management Company. Mr. Medyouni was speaking at the signing ceremony of a scientific cooperation agreement at the headquarters of the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research between 3 universities and the Airport Management Company, with a view to providing modern technical and technological services and solutions. And with this, we come to the end of our weekly broadcast devoted to Algerian economic news. Take care and bye-bye for now.
Welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine. Today we will speak about vegetables, their benefits for our health,